Over the last few weeks, I've been testing out the Apple Watch Ultra 2 with the beta version of WatchOS 26 to see if the Apple Watch Ultra 2 is still one of the best smartwatches out there to track your health and your sports. And of course, that also includes testing out Workout Buddy, basically a coach that guides you through your different workouts, and I have a lot to say about it.
You are continuing a strong week of 28 workouts. Last Thursday, you set a new record for your move ring with 3,231 kilocalories.
For those of you who don't know me, my name is Rob and I'm a postdoctoral scientist specializing in biological data analysis. And as always, that's exactly what we will focus on mostly in this video, data and data science. And we'll be doing systematic testing of the heart rate tracking, sleep stage tracking, and some GPS tracking performance of the Apple Watch Ultra 2 with WatchOS 26. Of course, this is not the final release yet, but the public beta, which should at least be close to that. And like I said, I'll also talk a bit about Workout Buddy, which I like and dislike at the same time. And I think for some of you that will be super helpful because it is able to summarize a lot of your data and sort of try to motivate you. But I also think for some of you it will be kind of annoying in a way. So I'll try to explain what it is, how it works, but I'll tell you more about that after we take a look at the heart rate tracking performance of the Apple Watch Ultra, and I tested it during 4 different kinds of sports: indoor cycling, outdoor cycling, running, and weightlifting. So let's head over to my computer and let's take a look at the results. Now, as a reference for the heart rate tracking, as always, we'll use the Polar H10 ECG chest strap to track my heart rate, and we'll compare the measurements of that ECG chest strap to the Apple Watch Ultra 2. Now, an ECG chest strap actually measures the electroactivity of the heart, and it's the most reliable way to measure your heart rate. And in this overview, the reference is along the horizontal axis and the Apple Watch Ultra 2 along the vertical axis, where each dot is a heart rate measurement. And if the points are closer to the blue line, that means there's a better agreement between the reference device and the Apple Watch Ultra 2. And basically all points are on or super close to the blue line. So this looks really good. And the correlation, which is this R value up here, is also really good at a rounded value of 1.00. And it cannot be higher than 1. So a rounded value of 1.00 is super good. So I'm really happy with this result. But let's take a look at the individual sessions because any missing heart rate data won't be displayed in this overview. And the Apple Watch sometimes misses some heart rate, for instance, during weightlifting. So let's make sure that's not the case for indoor cycling. Here you can see the first interval spinning session I did with the reference device in blue-green and the Apple Watch Ultra 2 in red. And this just looks really good. Most of the time, the red line overlaps almost perfectly with the blue-green line. So I have nothing to complain about here. Then this second session also looks really good. Only here in the beginning is there a slight deviation and maybe right here as well, but definitely close enough to perfect to not matter. And then this last session is also really good. So in terms of raw heart rate tracking performance, this looks really good. But let's compare this to the competition and my previous testing. And that's displayed in this overview right here. So again, we use that R value or correlation, where the further to the top right the device is, the better is its agreement with that reference. And the Apple Watch Ultra 2 with WatchOS 26 is marked in red right here. And it's really amongst the top performers. But there's so many devices here. So let's zoom into just the better performing devices so we can actually read some of those labels. And that zoomed in view is displayed right here. It's still a bit hard to read. But as you can see, my retesting of the Apple Watch Ultra 2 is really amongst the top performers and basically all the other Apple Watches. We can, for instance, see that my previous testing of the Apple Watch Ultra 2 and the Apple Watch Ultra 1 are basically giving the same result. So even a year later, it's still doing amazing, and there honestly wasn't much to improve on. So in terms of raw heart rate tracking, it's still the top device out there when you want to track your heart rate on the wrist. At least that's for indoor cycling. But what about some other exercises like running? Well, let's take a look. And here we have that overview similar to before, but now for running, where we see most points are on or close to the blue line. The correlation is now a tiny bit lower at 0.99, so not a rounded value of 1.00, but 0.99 is still super close to that. But I had one weird thing happening with running. Let me show you. And that weird thing happened during this run right here, where for some reason, at least in the export that I got, the heart rate data was missing for basically the first half of the run. And I'm not sure if I forgot to turn on the Apple Watch during this run, and this is just the automatically recorded heart rate, if the data was somehow lost, or if it actually failed to detect my heart rate during this run and I did activate it. So I'm not entirely sure what's going on here. Still, when the heart rate was detected, it was super accurate. And for this other interval run here, we really didn't see any issues, at least not in terms of data being missing. There are some slight deviations here though, where for instance here detected a slightly too high heart rate, and here a slightly too low heart rate. But overall, this would be good enough for me, and basically any decision I would make during my run in terms of pace wouldn't change if I measured it with my Apple Watch Ultra 2 or the ECG chest strap. So generally a really good performance. And if you compare that correlation to many other devices out there, we get this overview right here, where the Apple Watch Ultra 2 is marked in red. And as you can see, it's really among some of the better performers out there. It's close to, for instance, my previous testing of the Apple Watch Ultra 2 in black right here, but also the Apple Watch Series 9. So far, based on this testing, the Apple Watch is just an amazing heart rate tracker. Much better, at least on me, than some dedicated sports watches like those from Garmin. Now, Garmin also has its advantages, for instance, amazing GPS tracking and an amazing ecosystem. However, in terms of pure heart rate tracking, at least on me, and I've also seen it on my colleague Raphael, Apple is really the best out there. But let's make things a bit more difficult even, and let's take a look at the results for cycling outside. Now this tends to be much harder because there's a lot of bumpiness and a lot of tension on my arms. But first I have to mention, it's not cheap making YouTube videos like this, and I'm doing all of this next to my full-time job as a postdoctoral scientist. Now if you want to support the channel, there are several ways of doing it. Just subscribing, liking and commenting is already amazing, but if you want to directly financially support the channel and get early access to many of my videos, consider becoming a YouTube member. That's basically Patreon on YouTube. That's the most direct way of supporting the channel financially. Or if you're into running, I really recommend the Runner app, which I affiliate with, because I'm a cyclist by training, not a runner, and I'm really getting into running now, but I need running plans that are tailored to me. And for that, I use the Runner app. It coaches me during my runs and makes the best running plans in my opinion. Now, if you want a 2-week free trial on Runner, check out my link up here or down here. Or if you're gonna buy anything at all on Amazon, if you first click on my affiliate link, it doesn't cost you any extra, and at the same time you're supporting the channel with a small commission that I earn on that. Now enough about that, let's get back to the results and let's take a look at the results for cycling outside. And here we have that overview for cycling outside, with again the reference along the horizontal axis and the Apple Watch Ultra 2 along the vertical axis. And we again see that almost all points are on or close to the blue line, with a really high correlation of 0.99. Now cycling outside is generally a very hard exercise for devices to track, and I even did a quite long bike ride with the Apple Watch Ultra 2. And it really seems to have done well. Again, I'm curious about missing data, but at first glance, this looks really good. But let's take a look at those individual sessions. Here we have the first bike ride, and this already looks very good. There's a very good agreement between the Apple Watch Ultra 2 and the reference device. This second session is even better, I would say. Again, there are some small deviations like right here or right here. We saw the same thing right here, but otherwise it looks really good. Also, this session is almost perfect. The same goes for this session. Also right here, almost perfect, though right here we have a tiny deviation and also some details near the end are missed. And then there's this very long ride, or relatively long ride, that I did with my friend Thomas, which was about 126 kilometers, I think, with 1,500 height meters. And here the red line generally also overlaps very well with the blue-green line. Some details appear to be missed, but otherwise almost perfect agreement. By the way, if you want to follow all my running and cycling adventures, I'm now a Strava verified athlete. So if you want to follow me on Strava, you can find that up here, also in the description below. But how does this compare to the competition? Well, let's have a look. So we can see that in this overview right here. You're familiar with it by now. And as you can see, the Apple Watch Ultra 2 is one of the best performers out there, also with WatchOS 26. It's really doing well, but let's zoom in a bit to just the better performing devices, which is displayed in this overview right here. So these are just the devices with a correlation of 0.8 or higher. And as you can see, the Apple Watch Ultra 2 in 2025 did about as well as my original test of the Apple Watch Ultra 2 back in 2024, but also basically the same as the Apple Watch Ultra 1, or my testing of my other unit of the Ultra 2 in black. You can see very consistent results over the years with different Apple Watches. Apple just built a really good sensor and really good firmware to go along with that. So I'm really happy with these results. To close off, let's take a look at the results for weightlifting, and then we'll talk about workout body. And here we have the overview for weightlifting, which honestly looks really good. Most devices struggle here in this higher heart rate range, where when I do a set of exercises, there's a lot of tension on my wrist, and most devices just can't detect my heart rate on these moments. But instead of just not detecting a heart rate if you're struggling, they give you the wrong heart rate. And Apple doesn't do this, but sometimes it just doesn't give you a heart rate at all, which I wouldn't be able to see in this overview. So let's see if that's the case or not. Now in this first example weightlifting session, you can see each time I did a set of exercises, there was a peak in my heart rate, as you can see by the blue-green line. And in some cases, the Apple Watch in red followed along quite well, but sometimes it missed my peak. It really stopped detecting my heart rate, like right here. But generally this first session looks quite good. This second session is like half correct, half incorrect. So the first half is more or less correct, but near the end it couldn't detect the peaks in my heart rate. And for this last session where I also did a lot of legs, it actually looks a lot better. So here it had a lot easier time, also because most of the sessions just didn't involve tension on my wrist. So overall, pretty decent result, but you're always gonna miss some of the peaks in your heart rate. So I generally wouldn't recommend any device on the wrist for tracking your heart rate during weightlifting. Just buy yourself an ECG chest strap, you will get the most reliable results that way. But let's now talk about workout body. So what is this new workout body of Apple? Well, there's a lot of marketing around it, of course, but as I've experienced it, basically workout body is a coach that tries to motivate you during your workouts. So I've used it during different types of exercises. Whoa. Let's sit down for a second. Sorry, I'm just trying to show off my new bike. Back there, it's amazing. Let's sit down somewhere else. Workout Body basically is a coach that gives you a bunch of stats during your workout and tries to motivate you, but also in a way tell you when you've done enough. So it tells you when your workout rings and other rings are complete.
You burned 379 kilocalories, which was enough to close your exercise ring.
But what I found it most useful for is just giving me stats during my ride. So for instance, during cycling, every 5 kilometers or so, it would tell me my average heart rate and how I've been doing so far.
20 minutes into your workout, you have burned 144 kilocalories so far. Your average heart rate was 131 beats per minute for the last 10 minutes, a rise from the 10 minutes before.
And it's sort of useful for me. It's interesting, sometimes also a bit annoying. So in those moments when I don't need that update, I just shake my head with my AirPods in, of course, and then the notification goes away. And that reminds me, you need to have a Bluetooth audio source connected to it for it to work. It won't just work from your watch as is. It really needs a Bluetooth connection, so it won't use any internal speakers in the watch, for instance. So for me personally, it's somewhat motivating, but I don't really need any extra motivation during my workouts. It's sometimes interesting to get the statistics, or at the beginning of my ride, it will tell me this year so far you've cycled 2,000 kilometers.
Way to get your Friday started with an indoor cycling workout. You are continuing a strong week of 28 workouts. Last Thursday, you set a new record for your move ring with 3,231 kilocalories.
And those kind of things are interesting to hear. But if you're already motivated enough, I don't think you would need Workout Body, because Workout Body is also relentlessly positive. It will never say anything negative. And for it to be helpful for me, it would sometimes be nice for it to also say, hey, you're really slowing down at the moment. Could you go a little bit faster? Or maybe something like this. I don't even know exactly what I would need, but given its relentless positivity, sometimes it just feels a bit forced. Like I'm really slowing down a lot. I'm feeling quite tired, and it's still saying how amazing I'm doing.
Let's keep this positive momentum going.
But that's my personal opinion. I think if you need that kind of motivation and you like it when somebody gives you positive reinforcement, then Workout Body can be really handy. It's more of a gimmick to me personally, but for others, like I said, I can imagine it's really useful and really nice to get those updates on your heart rate, on your ride. You don't have to look at your wrist, but you still get updates on how things are going. So I think it's really personal. And one thing I found quite funny, at least in the beta, only the American US language setting worked, but I still had a Brit yelling in my ears.
You're 30 minutes away from closing your exercise ring. Let's ride!
Hello there, Rob from the future here. Excuse the image quality, I'm just recording this on my phone. But I wanted to add, even though I mentioned that I use this British voice, which is Jamie Ray heart horn or something like this. I can put it on screen right here. There's 2 other voices to choose from as well, and these are female voices. So you have other options. I guess this will also change as updates go on and on, but when I was testing it, there were 3 total voices to choose from. But okay, back to past Rob. So I just found it really amusing to use it. I don't think I would continue using it all the time, or at least I would want fewer updates, only maybe a summary at the end of my ride. But again, that's really personal and you can set it to whatever setting you like. Overall, it's good that they added it, and my hope is that with the new Apple Watches coming out, there will also be an improvement in data visualization in the app and data summary, because I'm not the biggest fan, at least compared to some of the competition, of how Apple gives you your information. It gives really good raw data, but it's still relatively raw data. Whereas for instance, Aura or Whoop have much better apps that better summarize all your results, give you a sleep score, I think also something rumored to potentially come to the new Apple Watches. And if Apple manages to make a native app, something similar to Aura or Whoop without a subscription, this could really be a game changer for many of you, because without a subscription, you would then have some of the best data quality and some of the best data summaries and actionable advice. But let's see what comes out in a few weeks. I'm really curious to find out. And talking about data, for me, in terms of what is important for data is also sleep, sleep quality and sleep stages. And of course, that potential sleep score that is rumored to be released with the new Apple Watch. But for that sleep score, probably the sleep stages are very important. So let's see how good the sleep stage tracking is on the Apple Watch Ultra 2 in 2025 with WatchOS 26. To test that, I compared the Apple Watch Ultra 2 against the Z-Max EEG headband, which can actually measure my brain waves and was specifically designed for sleep stage tracking. So let's see how the Apple Watch Ultra 2 did. And right here we have the results for the sleep stage tracking test, with the sleep stages according to the reference device here on top, and the sleep stages according to the Apple Watch Ultra 2 with WatchOS 26 on the left. And if they would perfectly agree, all values here in red should be 100%. So basically I normalized each of these columns to 100%, so we can see what percentage of each of the sleep stages according to the reference device was predicted as a sleep stage by the Apple Watch Ultra 2. And this generally looks really good. So first of all, for deep sleep, we see that about 74% of what was deep sleep according to the reference device was also predicted as deep sleep by the Apple Watch Ultra 2, and most confusion in this case was with light sleep at about 25%. Light sleep agreement is even better at about 87% with very little confusion. And REM sleep agreement, which is generally one of the hardest sleep stages for a device to track, is also really good at about 72%. Most devices struggle getting above 50%, and the Apple Watch does really well in this regard. And most confusion in this case was with light sleep. So this is a really good sleep stage tracking. Of course, this is just on me, so I'd like to do tests on other people at some point as well. But these results have been really consistent across WatchOS versions. All Apple Watches so far have really good sleep stage tracking in my testing. But we can actually compare these results to the competition, so let's do that. And those results are in this overview right here, where the average agreement over the 3 sleep stages is along the horizontal axis, and the worst out of those 3 sleep stages is along the vertical axis. So that basically means that the better the agreement with the reference device, the more to the top right the device is. And the new testing of the Apple Watch Ultra 2 in 2025 is right here. So really among some of the best performing devices. And it's really close to, for instance, my testing of the Apple Watch Generation 1, my previous testing of the Apple Watch Ultra 2, the black version of the Apple Watch Ultra 2, and other Apple Watches. So really consistent results again across all Apple Watches, and they're just doing really well. Now there's only 3 brands that do about as well as the Apple Watch. That's the Oura Ring, the Nuco Hour Sleep 2 app, and finally the 8 Sleep Pod. Now as you can see, the 8 Sleep Pod right here, so both the Generation 4 and 5, has some of the best sleep stage tracking out there, and it's my favorite sleep improvement device. So the Apple Watch you wear on your wrist, and it gives you really reliable sleep stage tracking at a decent price. But the 8 Sleep Pod is something you put around your mattress, and it can actively heat and cool each side of the bed independently. So it can be set to a different temperature for you and your partner. And it's basically the only reason I get any sleep on those hot summer nights. For me, in winter, I set it to heat a little bit in the beginning, and then during deep sleep, I have it set to cool me down a bit more. And in summer, I set it extremely cool, and also the blanket is now cooled, so I'm cooled from both the top and the bottom without having any aircon on. And even though I don't have a partner at the moment, when I did have one, she could set her side independently, and generally most people want a much warmer temperature than I need because I'm really a hot sleeper. Now the good thing about the 8Sleep Pod is that it can cool and heat and has really accurate heart rate and sleep stage tracking during the night. However, the downside is that it's really expensive, so only get it if you can really afford it. If you want the best discount possible to make it a little bit more affordable, you can use my affiliate link up here or down here, and that will give you the best deal possible on the 8Sleep Pod. And we're now already at generation 5, which also has the cooling blanket. But if you don't want to spend that much money, but you still have some money to spend, an Apple Watch is definitely a good sleep stage tracker. You just need to remember that immediately when getting up, you charge your watch for the rest of the day. So you maybe take half an hour while you're grabbing your coffee and showering for the watch to charge, because the battery life of the Apple Watch is not amazing. Generally, I can get by with maybe 2 days on my Apple Watch Ultra, or maybe even 3 days if I'm lucky, depending on how much sports I do. But that's one thing to keep in mind. And also when you're not exercising, the frequency that at baseline the Apple Watch measures your heart rate is also not very high. Can be like every 5 minutes or so. So that's also something to keep in mind. If you want all-day heart rate tracking, the Apple Watch doesn't necessarily give the same frequency as other devices. However, as you can see, at least on me, the sleep stage tracking is one of the best out there. Finally, I want to take a look at the GPS tracking. I only did some limited tests for this, but let's take a look. Now, the way we'll test the GPS tracking performance is by cycling the exact same route several times, and then seeing if the signals overlap really well, which makes it more likely that the GPS tracking is very good, or if there's a big deviation between the signals, this more likely means that the GPS tracking is not very good. Now I always start my ride on the corner right here, and as you can see, the signal was always acquired very quickly because it did 4 rides, and all 4 times it was close to that corner and very quickly acquired, so that's good. But in the beginning, we definitely see some deviations between the signal, but this is normal. Sometimes the watch needs some time to get a more accurate signal. Then here they're very consistent. However, here the signal appears to be somewhat smooth. So normally I would have a more straight line like this, but the signal here is somewhat smooth. Here it looks really good. The signals are very consistent. The consistency here is very good. One time I actually took a slightly different route. Here the consistency is decent, though definitely a bit smooth. Also right here, there was some construction here, so this is a true signal. Then here there's a bit of deviation. Again, I took some different routes right here. Here there's also definitely a bit of deviation. This looks quite okay. This area right here is good. Here we have a good consistency. Here there's a bit more deviation than I like to see because generally devices find it quite easy to track my signal right here. But overall still very good, honestly. I'm really nitpicking. Also here looking very good with again a slightly smooth signal, though maybe less smooth than before. I'm not really sure what's going on here. Here we have a super consistent signal, so very good. And basically up until the end, the signals are quite close together. Many devices struggle a lot more in this area, so this is actually quite good. So a slightly smooth signal, but the signals are very consistent. I do think that there's some kind of smoothing of the signal going on, so these are not the raw signals that were measured, but they were processed in some way. But let's see what the results look like for 4 times I cycled back from work. And right here we have the results for 4 times I cycled back from work. 1 time I started my workout at this location right here, and 3 times at the other building I work at. And generally the signal is acquired quickly again, and the signals are somewhat consistent, actually looking quite good right here. Also here there's quite some consistency, though I again suspect there's some smoothing of the signal going on. We're actually going through some buildings right here. This also looked quite good, a bit of deviation right here, but still quite good. Also looking quite good right here. I actually went somewhere else for a moment, so there's only 3 signals left. Here there's quite a bit of deviation, this looks less good. Also some smoothing right here. This looks quite okay. It's not perfect, but it's pretty good, I would say. The smoothing somehow makes it somewhat harder to interpret, because this might also make the signals more consistent, but you lose some detail in your signal, which sometimes also contains noise. So I understand why Apple does it, but it's also not perfect in the Garmin way, where some of the Garmin watches have really good GPS tracking and you can really trust what's going on there. So pretty good, good enough for most people, I would say. But in addition, let's take a look at a run that I did. And here we have the results for that run, where I basically ran in circles right here to see how consistent the signals would be. And interestingly, this is actually super good. I can imagine there might be less smoothing for running than for cycling because there's just a slower speed, so Apple knows there should be less smoothing there. But the signals are super consistent right here. There's a bit of deviation right here. I didn't really look at that before. Then here, many devices struggle, but this looks quite good, honestly. Really consistent signals overall. So I ran many circles here in Park Belvedere. And overall, I'm quite happy with these running results. But what do you think? Is this good enough for you or not? But let's get to the overall conclusions of the Apple Watch Ultra 2 with WatchOS 26 beta. Okay, so that was a lot of data again, but it really gives you a good impression of the quality of the Apple Watch Ultra, which is honestly pretty good. The heart rate tracking performance is some of the best out there. The sleep stage tracking is one of the best out there, and the GPS tracking is pretty decent. I do think with the smoothing, it's not my ideal case. So if I were to run a marathon or so, I would more likely for the GPS take a Garmin than the Apple Watch Ultra 2. Also because the battery life is not the best on the Apple Watch Ultra, though it will definitely last you a full marathon. I don't think you have to worry about that. So overall, the Apple Watch Ultra 2 is one of the most powerful sports and health tracking devices out there, at least in terms of raw data measurements and the quality of those measurements. So as I said, that goes for heart rate, sleep stages, and to a degree also GPS. The one thing where Apple is still lacking to some degree is the app experience and data integration and interpretation. So things like the Oura Ring or the Whoop Strap have a great app that integrates all data together, gives you an interpretation and understandable explanation of that data, and some actionable advice to go with it. So this is where Apple still has to make some improvements. There are third-party apps that do this. I think one is called Athletic, another Bevel. I've not really used this myself yet. I still need to test them, though of course they use the underlying data from the Apple Watch, so there's less for me to test there than a more subjective experience. However, with the rumored improvements potentially coming to the new Apple Watch lineup, also in terms of sleep interpretation, the Apple Watch Ultra, or any Apple Watch for that matter, could really become a super powerful device in 2025 to track your health, your sports, and your general recovery. So I'm super excited to see what in a month or two will be released, and if the new Apple Watch Ultra 3, if that comes, and the new Apple Watch Series 11 will be able to even further improve on what is already a very powerful device. Now again, if you want to support me in making these videos, because I'm doing all of that next to my normal day job as a scientist, becoming a YouTube member is the most direct way of doing that, and you will get early access to videos like this. You can also use my Amazon affiliate link for any purchase on Amazon, and then it won't cost you any extra and you'll be supporting the channel. Or finally, you can use one of my affiliate links to, for instance, the H Sleep Pod or the Runner app, and you'll be giving yourself the best deal possible and supporting the channel at the same time. And the same goes of course also for the Whoop Strap. Now, given that you watched this whole video of the Apple Watch Ultra 2 in 2025, check out this video on the H Sleep Pod or this video on the Whoop Strap.